This event took place in Germany in the summer of 2017. I was on a holiday with my family, parents and younger brother, and were due to stay in a small apartment for a few days near Lake Constance. After a long journey from England, we arrived at the destination, a small guest house with a few rooms and a separate apartment complex. As we arrived late, the kitchen had closed and we didn't have any food with us, so we had to skip dinner. We then went over to our apartment to unpack and just rest for a bit. Nothing seemed off about the apartment at first glance. Everything seemed to just be in order, and it didn't seem to have any bad vibe at all. I did notice, however, that the cable connecting the TV to the wall had been severed, almost like something had chewed through it or something. I didn't think too much of it, as the TV was quite small, and there probably wasn't too much in the way of any decent channels anyway. Once we had unpacked, we went to the bar around the corner that was open late for a couple of drinks. My brother and I had left our phones at the apartment, so I went back to retrieve them from the safe. And this is when things began to get a bit strange. So, I went over to the safe to get the phones. I had operated the safe before and knew the code and how to open it. This time, however, it just wouldn't open. I entered the code and pressed the unlock button, but nothing happened. I kept repeating this, and nothing happened, and while doing this, I began to get this feeling that someone was just standing behind me. But every time I turned around, no one was there. I was then overcome with this dizziness and almost an electric feeling, as if I was being pumped full of electricity. It occurred for a few seconds. All the while I felt as if I couldn't move and that someone was behind me. The feeling wore off though, and I looked around to see nothing there. I tried the safe again, and this time it opened. I went back to the bar and I told my family what had happened. They were a bit taken aback and didn't know what to make of it. We all returned to the apartment though just before midnight, and that's when things began to get even weirder. So there were 2 bedrooms to this apartment. My brother and I were sharing one, and my parents were in the double bedroom. My brother complained that he felt sick and he went to go sleep with my parents. A few minutes later though, he was being violently sick in the toilet. My mum was panicking because of the amount of sick that he was retching up. More horrifyingly though, the colour of this sick was just jet black. He hadn't eaten much that day and he didn't consume anything of that colour, so it was weird. But he immediately felt better after the ordeal, and then we just all went to bed. Being someone who believes in the supernatural, but also being fairly rational, I tried my best to reassure myself that there was probably just a logical explanation for all of this. This was made difficult, however, by the events that followed. So, despite the windows being open, my room just felt unnaturally hot. The outside temperature wasn't particularly warm, so I found this somewhat strange. Seeing as I couldn't sleep, I decided to go on my phone for a bit. The Wi-Fi, which had been fine earlier, just didn't seem to work. Most of the electric seemed to work 1 minute and then just not the next, and it could have been faulty wiring maybe, but something just seemed off to me. I put my phone on charge and sat at the table across the room, and the overhead lamp didn't work at first, but after flipping the switch a few times, it eventually turned itself on. I grabbed the pen and the paper that was on the table and began writing out football scores. Not something that I would usually do, but I was bored and didn't know what else to write. After about 5 minutes of doing this, the light began to flicker though. I didn't worry about it too much, and I just carried on writing. But what happened next, I will never forget. I began to feel just overcome by this peculiar energy. An electric feeling similar to what I had experienced early on that night. I was unable to move, and I just couldn't take my eyes off the piece of paper that I'd been writing on. The electric energy surged through my body, and everything around me was blurred out as all my attention was focused onto the paper in front of me. The writing and the numbers that I had written on the piece of paper slowly began to turn into a foreign language. The writing was kind of Latin-looking and was like nothing I'd really ever seen before. I believe that it was possibly Gothic script, a script that is hundreds of years old and was used in Western Europe. It was a surreal experience, and I don't know how long the ordeal lasted, but it seemed like a long time. I was dazed and confused. I didn't know what to do with myself, so eventually I just went back to bed. After a few hours of sleep, though, I woke up to what sounded like a low-pitched growling. Thinking that I was half asleep, I gave myself a few seconds to adjust. I realized that I was now fully awake and I could still hear the noise. It sounded like it was coming from under the bed as well. At this, I hid under the covers, trying desperately to control my breathing and not freak out. The growling didn't sound like that of a dog or anything. It sounded like something, honestly, I've never heard before. I was now starting to realize that there was no real explanation for any of this activity, though. This place must be haunted by something, possibly dark, and it wanted us straight out of there. But it was right when I was having these thoughts that was when I felt air blowing on my feet, which were exposed, sticking out from under the sheets. I froze, hoping that my mind was just playing tricks on me in my paranoid state. But I was wrong. Warm, damp air was being blown onto my feet from something. It was unmistakable, and it felt as if a dog was sat at the end of my bed, breathing heavily on my feet. I curled up into a ball instantly and hid myself under the covers completely, hoping that it would stop. During the early hours, though, I heard what sounded like barking or something like that, coming from right outside of my window. The windows were open in my room, and this was a ground floor apartment. Eventually, I plucked up enough courage and I grabbed my phone, put the torch on, and I ran to the window to see what was outside. I could still hear the barking and growling as I approached the window, and as soon as I looked outside, the noises just stopped. It couldn't have been a dog because not only did it not sound like one, but it also stopped as soon as I shone my phone torch outside. It just wouldn't have had time to have gotten out of sight as there was nowhere to hide. Once again, though, I felt a presence behind me. I span around and shone my torch around the room, hoping to catch something, but I couldn't see anything. It was now about 4 a.m, and honestly, I just wanted to get some sleep. I was scared, but I was also getting irritated because I was just so exhausted. So I got back into bed and I just drifted off to sleep. When I woke up, it was late morning. Everybody else was awake. I asked them if they heard any weird noises coming from my room, and they said that they didn't. My mum, however, said that she heard a growling and a barking coming from the back of the apartment, similar to what I had actually heard. She said that she thought that it was probably just a dog, and she just went back to sleep. She said that she also heard music coming from outside the window, and it was a creepy kind of melodic-sounding tune being played on a string instrument of some sort. Everyone was growing tired of the place, though, and we all decided that it was best to just leave and find somewhere else to stay. My brother was still a bit traumatized from his ordeal the night before. He was also alarmed by what I had experienced and didn't want to stay another night. The staff back at the main guest house weren't happy that we were leaving and demanded that we pay the full price. My dad argued that the place was in a bad state, considering the appliances weren't working properly. He didn't mention the strange activity, though, and we eventually left that afternoon and found a new place to stay for the remainder of our trip. This place was bed and breakfast and was much nicer. To be honest, though, we were happy to just be away from that other place. Unfortunately, the rest of the trip didn't really go to plan. My dad became ill and was in bed with a fever for a couple of days. He said that it was like nothing he'd ever had before and would have these hallucinations of the previous place that we stayed at. He also heard creepy voices talking to him, and this subsided once the fever disappeared and he made a full recovery almost instantly, which was kind of weird. On the journey home, my mum was also violently sick, worryingly so, because this sick was black, the same colour as my brother's. I then began to feel really sick on the final part of the journey as we got back to England. Not long after we got back to our house too, I also had to run to the bathroom and was sick rather violently. This meant that all 4 of us had now been ill since staying at that apartment. I don't know what was going on with that apartment that we stayed in, but it sure as hell wasn't friendly. I try and convince myself that it wasn't anything sort of demonic in nature, but it's hard to think of what else it could have been, or what it could have done if we'd stayed longer. My family is just as creeped out by this as I am, as are the other people that we've told. The only thing that is certain, though, is that we'll never be returning to that place, ever again. So my dad has had several encounters with things that are not of this earth, as he likes to put it. He wasn't sure who to tell these stories to about his encounters. I haven't had any myself, so I'm a little skeptical, I must admit. But seeing how he speaks and what it does to him when he talks about it makes me believe him. Needing to get his experience out there, he has submitted MUFON reports and contacted others, and I also wanted to share it with others as he told it. So, this one took place near East Prairie MO on October 1st, 1987, the first day that he got to go bow hunting. With this encounter, out of many that I've had, me and Corky were going hunting. It was 3 a.m., New Madrid County, MO. My friend Corky was driving us. We were on a 2-lane highway. It was a bright, clear night, and as we topped a hill, there was a stationary object hovering about 30 yards ahead. It was 3 feet off the road, and as wide as the road. It was about 35 to 40 feet tall. It was in the shape of a crystal faceted diamond that sparkled every colour like a crystal when our truck's headlights hit it. We obviously came to a complete stop on the road. But then we crept towards the crystal slowly. It started to move, and we gave chase after it. It was a 2-mile straight stretch on the road. The craft stayed about 10 feet above the road, and eventually we lost the craft when it went over the trees on the levee at the curve of the road. We turned up at the levee that borders the Mississippi River. We park on the top of the levee at the hunting area. As I go to exit the vehicle, I see out of the driver's window a craft. It was hovering stationary, eye level, opposite a small thin tree line down the levee about 40 feet away or so. We observed it for roughly 10 minutes, and then another pair of hunters came upon our location. When their truck got close to us, the object just blanked out, remaining in position but darkened to have no visibility except a shimmer of a blur outline from the moonlight, kind of. The truck parks directly in front of us. I tell my friend sitting next to me that it's still there, you just can't see it, and that the other hunters will likely never notice it. We exit the truck after the other hunters. We get our bows and equipment out from the back of the truck. All of us move down the levee, walking toward the wooded area with the logging road. The 2 others were about 20 feet ahead of me, and my friend was 3 feet ahead of me as well. At the bottom of the levee, I looked back, and I saw the crystal craft has relit and is floating 3 feet above the cab of our truck, making the truck visible now. They keep walking, and I stay and watch for a few seconds, and I catch up to my friend and tell them to look back. He cussed me and said, "I'm not looking back. I know it's there, damn it. I don't want to see it." And at that moment, I looked back again at the truck and see that the craft has moved towards me, down the levee, staying 3 feet off the ground. The glow from the crystal lit up the ground behind us, and it made an organic sound, like someone was softly going shh as it followed and when it was stationary. I turned to my friend saying, "You have to look now, it's getting close." As I did, I heard a voice in front of us in the dark. The other hunter asked us which trail we were taking. As he did, I realized that he was looking our direction, but for some weird reason, he didn't see the craft. He had no reaction to it, so I immediately looked back to see that it had disappeared again. Then, as we got to the trail, my friend and I paused inside the tree line. I looked for the other hunters and see the craft is on the other side of the logging road in the tree line, following the other hunters now. The ground and the trees lit up while the craft followed them silently, and that was the point at which I can remember coming from the hunt, with it being daylight now and not even remembering going on the hunt. When we got back too, the other hunters had left, and for the life of me, I just cannot remember what we did during that hunt. It must have been about 10 o'clock when me and Corky got back though, and this was just one of the times that I've encountered these sorts of craft. I had to think about it, but I believe that this happened in the 6th grade. It's hard for me to believe that this took place 20 years ago now. One thing that I don't remember, though, is what our science project was exactly. All I know is that I got partnered up with this little Mexican kid in my class named Brian. He seemed like a pretty chill kid at school. He was chubby, quiet, and kind of shy. But when I went to his house to work on our project for the first time, he was apparently much more comfortable and seemed to be very outgoing. He made jokes and laughed a lot more than usual. He kept saying stuff to his mum in Spanish, and then they would both laugh at me, but I never thought that that was really mean or anything, and I would just laugh along, even though I have no idea what they were saying. Usually right afterwards, though, he would tell me what they had actually supposedly said. And at one point, we were in his room, and he asked me to go ask his mum for lined paper. I told him that I didn't speak Spanish, and he should go and ask her, but he said that he would just tell me how to say it. I don't remember exactly, but he told me to say something, and I said it. And then I went to go and ask his mum. I knew that something was off right away, though, just by the way that she looked at me, like I had said something really crazy. She grabbed my hand and walked me to the bathroom like I was a special little boy. And once we were in the bathroom, she pointed at the toilet paper with that confused look still on her face, as if to say, where the hell else would it be? I was confused and could only speak to her in English while she spoke to me in Spanish, and we didn't understand each other. Soon we heard Brian having a hilarious laughing fit from the other room, laughing so hard like he thought it was the funniest thing ever. But I was pretty sure that it was only kind of funny. I wasn't worried though, and I just laughed it off like, "Aha, yeah, you got me." But eventually he became really excited to show me something. He told me that he would be right back, and then he ran out of his room. He was gone for a minute or so, and then he returned, telling me to follow him, and he was so sure that I was going to love whatever he was about to show me, so I was kind of excited too. I couldn't wait. We get outside, and he goes to this little shed and pulls out a lawnmower. He tells me to follow him, and he started the mower, began walking, and then gestured with his hand again for me to follow him. As we walked, we rounded a corner, and there on the ground was a net full of frogs. There was maybe 20 or more frogs in there, and I didn't have time to stop him. Right before it happened, we looked at each other too, him looking at me to make sure that I was looking, and me looking at him in just pure confusion. He pulled back on the mower, raising the blades, and then let the weight of the spinning blades fall down on the writhing pile of frogs. The mower bogged down for a split second, and there was a sickening wet crunching sound, followed by chunks being spit everywhere as he raised the blades back up. He raised the blades and then let them fall on the pile of frogs 4 or 5 times. All the while, he was just staring at my face and laughing maniacally at my horrified reaction. He released the bar and the mower went silent as he crumpled to the ground and began rolling around in the grass, just laughing his head off. A couple of frogs escaped without getting blended, thankfully, and a few more frantically scattered away from the mower, missing a few limbs. I just kind of awkwardly laughed with him and played along like nothing bad had just happened. I never really get disgusted to the point of throwing up, and it's actually hard to disgust me at all, but from that point on, I definitely knew that there was something seriously wrong with Brian, and until now I've never really told anyone. I wouldn't say that I was afraid. It was just that I didn't think that it was a good idea to tell anybody what had happened. Not his mum, and not my friends, and not my parents, not my brother or my sister, and not even my best friend. I just didn't tell anybody anything about it, and Brian never did anything like that or mention it again. That I'm aware of anyway. It was just the weirdest thing that I've ever been confronted with. They say that it's the quiet ones you gotta watch out for. I haven't seen him since 6th grade ended, but sometimes I wonder just what kind of person that he actually turned out to be. G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.